He was the quiet one in the room, but not because he had nothing to say. He was silent because there was already too much noise, not just from voices, but from feelings. That was childhood for him. A dinner table full of talking mouths and clashing energy, where no one ever looked down to ask the boy sitting under the table why he never joined the conversation. He didn't feel excluded. He felt saturated. The way the mother's tension spread through her fork movements. The father's throat tightening before he answered anything. The siblings' too loud jokes that try to keep the room from noticing the fatigue on everyone's face. It wasn't chaos. It was pressure, emotional air thick enough to taste. He wasn't afraid of people. He was just full of them. Carnegie might have said empathy is often mistaken for sensitivity, but it's really a form of early overadaptation. A child who learns to track microshifts in adult energy long before he learns to name his own. That's what happened to him. He began to read too much, too fast, too often. And eventually, his body learned to do one thing: contract. He sat under that table not because he was shy, but because it was the only place that didn't ask him to process everything at once. But even there, the sound of plates, the tone of correction, the absence of a question directed at him, all of it landed like invisible dust. And over time, that silence became his first language. Not because it was peaceful, but because it was necessary. He walks into the room like anyone else, but his body always enters first. Shoulders pull back half a second before the door closes. The breath rises, not from surprise, but in preparation. No one has said a word yet, but he already knows. He feels it in the space behind the eyes, the shift in temperature near the doorway, the way the air doesn't move evenly across the floor. Some people need language to understand others. He only needs posture. The way his father's neck stiffens at the base. The way his mother's hands stay still, too still, above a cup of tea she hasn't sipped. The way sound gets sharper around unresolved tension, even when the voices are polite. His chest tightens before anyone calls it a conflict. His throat stays open but unused. There's nothing to say because nothing has been said, and still, everything is already felt. Carnegie said the most emotionally responsive people are not those who cry easily, but those who cannot stop their bodies from translating the room. This man's nervous system has spent years reading beyond what's spoken. By now, it doesn't ask for permission. It reacts. Heart rate accelerates just enough. Skin gets a shade warmer. The diaphragm stops halfway down. There is no crisis, but there is weight, and he wears it in muscle. When he was younger, he didn't know why family dinners made his shoulders ache the next day. Why his stomach twisted during small arguments that everyone else had already forgotten. He thought it was a personal flaw. Maybe he was too sensitive, too weak, too internal. But it wasn't weakness. It was intake. And once the body learns to carry what no one else wants to hold, it rarely puts it down. Empathy, for him, is not a feeling. It's a function. It doesn't wait for emotional signals. It detects tension in micro-movements, in the way someone's voice skips a frequency, in the absence of sighs, in the unfinished blink that says more than any sentence. And because his body catches it all, he starts to lose track of where he ends and others begin. His shoulders ache from other people's silence. His breathing adjusts to their avoidance. His body becomes the room before anyone realizes there's something wrong in it. That's the cost. No boundary. Just absorption. By now, he doesn't wait for people to say what they feel. He knows it before the sentence finishes forming, in the delay before a reply, in the angle of a glance, in the way someone chooses a different seat at the table. Most would call it intuition, but for him, it's mechanics. He tracks nervous systems like languages. He knows when someone is irritated before they know it themselves. He senses when love shifts toward doubt, even if the voice still says everything's fine. In relationships, this became his currency, silent translation. He could de-escalate conflict before it began, offer comfort without being asked, mirror emotional tones so well that people often said, "You just get me." And they meant it, because he did. But empathy doesn't mean reciprocity. It means the work of emotional listening without guarantees of being heard. When he was hurting, he didn't speak quickly, not out of pride, out of exhaustion. He waited, hoping someone might ask, "Are you okay?" without needing to be told first. But silence from him was interpreted as coldness, as distance, as if all the listening he had done disqualified him from needing to be listened to in return. Carnegie would call this the empathy paradox, when the person most attuned becomes the one most neglected, simply because they make it look easy to manage without care. There were moments he tried to express himself, but the words came out flat, disorganized, never quite matching what lived inside. He didn't have practice explaining what he carried. His strength had always been absorbing, not articulating. So the pattern repeated. He understood first. He soothed first. He held first. But when it was his turn to be seen, people looked at his silence and saw distance, not fatigue. He became a mirror. Clear, reflective, useful, but rarely looked into. And when no one reflects him back, he starts to wonder if he still exists in their eyes at all. It didn't start with an explosion. It never does. Not with him. The first crack in his pattern was quiet. It came during a conversation that felt just like any other, a disagreement about something small, unimportant on the surface. Normally, he would have softened his voice, recalibrated his tone, offered his perspective in a way that felt safe for the other person. Not because he wanted to win, but because he wanted connection to survive. But this time, he blinked, once, slowly, and didn't speak. Not because he didn't care, but because he finally realized how much effort it took to always be the one who understood first. His body didn't rise to meet the moment. It withdrew, silently. The shoulders stayed lowered. The throat didn't tighten. There was no urge to defend or fix. Just stillness. It wasn't shut down. It was detachment. Carnegie often described emotional burnout not as collapse, but as subtle refusal. The body quietly deciding that one more interaction might cost more than it can recover. That's what happened. He sat there, eyes steady, breathing shallow but even, and chose not to enter the loop again. No restatement, no reassurance, no translation. Just the simplest answer, silence. And the person across from him noticed, not in panic, but in confusion. Because silence from him was not common. He was the one who carried conversations, who knew how to hold the tone when it cracked. But now, his silence wasn't listening. It was protective, not aggressive, just absent. He didn't leave the room, but something in him left the pattern. Empaths don't disappear in fire. They fade in absence. And it begins the moment they stop trying to be understood, not out of defiance, but because the weight of always explaining oneself feels heavier than being misunderstood. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was a blink. And in that blink, something closed. Not the relationship, not the love, but the willingness to carry more than his share one more time. Something has shifted, but not on the surface. Outwardly, nothing's changed. He still shows up, still smiles at the right time, still nods when someone speaks. But inside, his presence has begun to dissolve. He's in the room, but not within it. He hears the conversations, but they don't reach him. People talk about their day, their plans, their feelings. He listens like always. But there's no echo inside. No resonance. Just air. He used to register everything. The small hesitations in tone, the mismatched words and micro-expressions, the tension beneath casual talk. Now, he hears the same things, but his body no longer responds. The shoulders no longer tense with anticipation. The chest doesn't tighten with secondhand worry. Even his breathing has changed, slower, lower, not forced, just detached. He isn't resisting. He's letting go. Carnegie would call this the withdrawal of emotional investment, not as punishment, but as survival. When an empath reaches the limit of what can be given without return, the nervous system quietly deactivates its listening mode. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. The body stops preparing to receive people who never really arrived for him in the first place. No one notices. Because from the outside, he's still there, polite, reliable, unchanged. But inside, the room has emptied. The silence is no longer a tool for understanding. It's become a shelter. A quiet corner where he can exist without having to absorb what no longer feeds him. They still talk. He still hears them. But their words pass through him like radio static. No offense taken. No anger held. Just absence. He still cares. But caring no longer costs him everything. And that's the new boundary. This is how empaths begin to disappear. Not by walking out, but by staying in places that no longer feel like home. Until, slowly, they stop feeling anything at all. There was no dramatic exit. No note. No slammed door. Just a morning like any other. Except the room felt colder, though the windows were closed. His things were still where they'd always been. Shoes by the wall, toothbrush in the cup, coat on the hook. But something vital was missing, and it wasn't physical. It was him. His presence. His noticing. The subtle warmth he always carried into a space. The quiet regulation he offered without ever naming it. Gone. The night before had been normal. The same conversations. The same silence. But somewhere between then and now, he had left. Not with his feet. With his energy. Carnegie would say goodbye is rarely spoken by people like him. It's embodied. When the internal system has gone quiet for too long, when the emotional intake has exceeded capacity for too many years, the nervous system chooses peace before the mouth can form a sentence. It doesn't need to explain. It just stops returning to what drains it. The hardest part is that no one knows the exact moment he disappeared. Because he didn't leave with noise. He left the way he lived. Gently, carefully, almost invisibly. Someone might say later, he seemed fine. Another might say, I didn't think he'd ever stop showing up. But there is no exact timestamp for disconnection. There's just a growing silence that no one hears until it echoes. And when they finally notice he's gone, they'll look around and say, but nothing's missing. Except everything is. Because when an empath disappears, it's not the body that leaves. It's the thread that held the entire emotional fabric together. And once that thread is gone, you start to feel the unraveling in ways words can't trace. That it didn't happen right away. At first, his absence just felt like quiet. The meetings were shorter. The rooms less reflective. There were fewer check-ins, fewer unspoken corrections, fewer moments where someone paused and thought twice before reacting. Because he wasn't there to soften the energy anymore. But slowly, the difference became structural. At work, tasks didn't feel heavier, they felt messier. Misunderstandings grew faster. Tension lingered longer. At home, minor conflicts sharpened. No one stepped in to de-escalate, because no one knew how. They had relied on a balance they never saw until it was removed. Carnegie taught that some people act as regulators for entire systems without ever announcing that role. They don't hold power through position. They hold stability through presence. And when their emotional labor goes unnoticed, it becomes invisible until it's gone. Only then do people begin to ask different questions. When did we last ask how he was doing? When did he stop laughing in meetings? When did he start going quiet at dinner? These aren't dramatic realizations. They come in small waves, moments of discomfort, followed by memory. A message he used to send first. A small task he always completed without being asked. The way he made room for others without taking up much himself. And then they start to understand. He was the one who held the unspoken parts. The ones that didn't fit on to-do lists or timelines or romantic milestones. He made the air safer. He made tension less sharp. And because he never asked for praise, they assumed he didn't need it. Now, in his absence, they begin to feel the weight he carried. Not as guilt, at least, not yet, but as contrast. The difference between when he was there and when he wasn't. Because what he gave wasn't obvious. It was structural. And now that it's missing, everything leans, just slightly, in the wrong direction. There was no arrival. No grand realization. Just one quiet morning, somewhere far from the rooms he used to translate, from the emotions he used to carry. The air is cool, not cold. The water still. No signal, no notification, no voice asking for anything. He's not hiding. He's not retreating. He's simply standing, upright, undemanding, whole. His hands are in his pockets. Not clenched. Just there. The breath drops into his stomach the way it was always meant to, unguarded, full. For the first time in years, he isn't waiting for someone to walk in, for a tone to shift, for tension to announce itself. The body no longer scans. It just rests. Carnegie might say that real healing for empaths doesn't come from being seen by others, but from choosing to no longer abandon themselves. That's what this is. Not a new identity. Not revenge. Not a reinvention. Just silence that belongs to him. There's no one to please here. No system to stabilize. No expectation to pre-read. The nervous system recalibrates slowly. The heart rate levels out. The body begins to remember its original form, not as a container for others, but as a space of self-recognition. He doesn't resent those he left behind, but he no longer orients to them. He doesn't need to be understood anymore, because he finally understands himself. And in that silence, he finds something he hadn't known he lost: weightlessness. Not emptiness, just release. Because the empath doesn't vanish to be missed. He vanishes to come home.